All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We're all about getting to the heart of things here, right? No fluff, just the good stuff. Today we're diving deep into a book that you've probably at least heard of, maybe even read, Atomic Habits by James Clear.
That's right. A book all about how those tiny, seemingly insignificant improvements you make each day, those 1% gains, can actually snowball into something much bigger over time.
Yeah, and that's the part that really caught my eye, the idea that you don't need these massive overnight transformations to see real change, that those small, consistent actions can actually compound and lead to some pretty remarkable results.
Exactly. It's kind of like, think about investing, right? If you consistently invest even a small amount of money over time, thanks to the magic of compound interest, that can really grow into a significant sum. And it's the same principle with habits. Small changes, done consistently, add up in a big way.
That's such a good analogy. So in this deep dive, we're going to break down some of the most important actionable stuff from Atomic Habits so you can, actually start using these ideas to build better habits in your own life. We'll skip the filler and just focus on the stuff that can really make a difference.
And one of the things that really struck me was this idea of identity-based habits. It's not just about setting goals. It's about shifting your mindset to really focus on who you want to become.
Okay, so let's break that down a little bit. Identity-based habits.
Yeah.
So instead of saying, I want to lose 10 pounds or I want to write a novel, you're thinking more about, I am a healthy person or I am a writer.
Exactly. It's about aligning your actions with the identity you want to embody. If you see yourself as a healthy person, you're more likely to make choices that support that identity, like choosing nutritious foods or exercising regularly.
It's like you're not just trying to achieve a specific outcome, you're actually changing who you are at a deeper level.
Exactly. And that's what makes this approach so powerful. It's not just about willpower or motivation, it's about fundamentally shifting your self-perception.
And then the book lays out this really clear framework for how to actually put this into practice, right? It's not just like some vague concept.
No, not at all. Clear introduces what he calls the 4 laws of behavior change. These are basically the 4 fundamental principles that drive habit formation, and they can be applied to building good habits or breaking bad ones.
Okay, so let's dive into those 4 laws. The first one is all about the cue, and the strategy is to make it obvious. What does that actually mean when you're trying to build a habit?
Well, think about it this way. You can't act on a cue if you don't even notice it, right? So the idea here is to make the cues for your desired habits really obvious in your environment.
So like if you want to drink more water, you put a big water bottle right on your desk where you can't miss it.
Exactly. You're essentially designing your environment to make it easier to do the right thing. You're removing the friction so you don't have to rely on willpower or motivation as much.
Okay, that makes sense. So you make it obvious, then what's the next law?
So the second law is craving, and the strategy is to make it attractive. This is all about tapping into your brain's reward system.
So you're basically saying, make it something you actually want to do.
Right. Our brains are wired to seek out pleasure and avoid pain. So if you can make a new habit something you enjoy, or at least associate it with something enjoyable, you're much more likely to stick with it.
And this is where the idea of habit stacking comes in, right?
Exactly. Habit stacking is this really simple but effective technique where you link a new habit you want to build with an existing habit that you already do regularly. The formula is, after I current habit, I will new habit.
Oh, I get it. So like after I brush my teeth, I will floss, or after I pour my morning coffee, I will meditate for 1 minute.
Exactly. You're basically using the momentum of an existing habit to make it easier to adopt a new one.
That's so smart. Okay, so we've got make it obvious, make it attractive. What's the third law?
The third law is response, and the strategy is to make it easy.
That seems pretty straightforward. Make it easy to do the thing you want to do. But how do you actually make a habit easier?
Well, one of the most effective ways is to use something called the 2-minute rule.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that. What is it again?
Basically, you scale down your new habit to a version that takes less than 2 minutes to complete. So instead of saying, I'm going to work out for an hour today, you say, I'm going to put on my workout clothes.
Right, because just putting on your workout clothes is so much easier than doing a full workout. But the idea is that once you've taken that first step, you're more likely to keep going.
Exactly. It's about overcoming that initial inertia. By making the first step super easy,
Right.
you're more likely to actually get started, and you can build from there.
That's so clever. Okay, so we've got make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy. What's the fourth and final law?
The fourth law is reward, and the strategy is to make it satisfying.
So you're saying give yourself a little pat on the back when you do the thing you're trying to make a habit.
Basically, yeah. Our brains are wired to repeat behaviors that are rewarding, so if you can find a way to make a new habit feel good, you're more likely to stick with it.
So like if you're trying to drink more water, you could use a habit tracking app to mark off each glass you drink, and that visual representation of your progress can be really motivating.
Exactly. Or, if you're trying to exercise more, you could reward yourself with a healthy smoothie or a relaxing bath after your workout.
Okay, so those are the 4 laws. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying.
And these all work together, right? It's not like you just pick one and ignore the others.
Right, they're all interconnected. You want to use all 4 laws to create a system that makes it as easy as possible to build good habits and break bad ones.
So we've talked about the 4 laws, and we've touched on a few practical strategies like habit stacking and the 2-minute rule. Are there any other key takeaways from the book that you think are worth highlighting?
Well, one of the things Clear emphasizes is the importance of environment. He says that environment often matters more than motivation. What does that mean exactly?
It means that if you're surrounded by cues that trigger bad habits, it's going to be really hard to resist those habits, even if you're super motivated. So it's really important to design your environment in a way that supports your goals.
So like if you're trying to eat healthier, you don't keep junk food in the house.
Exactly. Or if you're trying to be more productive, you create a dedicated workspace that's free of distractions.
Makes sense. What else?
Another important point is the idea of the Goldilocks rule.
The Goldilocks rule.
Yeah, it's this idea that habits need to be challenging enough to keep you engaged, but not so challenging that they're overwhelming.
So, not too hard, not too easy, just right.
Exactly. If a habit is too easy, you might get bored and give up. But if it's too hard, you might get discouraged and give up. So it's important to find that sweet spot where you're challenged, but not overwhelmed.
So like if you're starting a new exercise routine, you don't want to go from 0 to 100 overnight. You want to start with something manageable and gradually increase the intensity as you get stronger.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between challenge and manageability.
All right, so you've covered a lot of ground here. Let's talk about the book itself for a minute.
Right.
What are some of its strengths and what are some things it maybe doesn't focus on as much?
Well, I think one of the biggest strengths of Atomic Habits is its practicality. It's full of really clear, actionable advice that you can start implementing right away.
Yeah, I agree. It's not just a bunch of theory, it's actually stuff you can use.
Exactly. And it's all based on solid scientific research, so you know it's not just some self-help guru's opinion.
Right, there's actual evidence to back up these ideas.
And I think it's also worth mentioning that it's really well written. Clear is a great writer, and he does a really good job of explaining complex concepts in a way that's easy to understand and engaging to read.
Yeah, it's definitely not a dry textbook style read.
No, it's actually pretty entertaining. And I think the ideas in the book are really universal. They can be applied to pretty much any area of life, whether you're trying to improve your health, your finances, your relationships, your career, or anything else.
And ultimately, it's about creating lasting change, right? It's not about quick fixes. It's about building habits that will stick with you for the long haul.
Exactly. It's a long-term approach to self-improvement. Now, as far as limitations go, I think one thing some people might point out is that the book can feel a little repetitive at times. Clear repeats some of his key points quite often, which can be helpful for reinforcement, but it can also feel a bit redundant.
Yeah, I noticed that too. But I guess it's understandable, given how important those key points are.
Right, and I think it's also worth noting that the book doesn't really delve too deeply into the emotional or psychological barriers that can sometimes prevent people from changing their habits.
That's true. It's a very logic-driven approach, which is great, but it doesn't necessarily address all the complex emotions that can come up when you're trying to change your behavior.
Exactly. And finally, I think it's important to point out that the book is primarily focused on individual habit formation. It doesn't really address how habits form within groups or organizations.
Right. So if you're looking for guidance on how to create a culture of good habits in your workplace, this book might not be the best resource.
Exactly. It's really more about personal development.
Okay, so with all that in mind, who do you think would benefit the most from reading Atomic Habits?
Well, I think anyone who's struggled to build good habits or break bad ones would find it really helpful. If you've tried and failed to stick to your New Year's resolutions in the past, this book could provide you with the tools you need to finally succeed.
Yeah, it's all about creating a system that sets you up for success.
Exactly. And I think it would also be really valuable for anyone who's looking for a structured, science-backed approach to self-improvement. If you're tired of fluffy self-help advice that doesn't really work, this book could be a breath of fresh air.
And it's really for anyone, right? It doesn't matter what your goals are, whether you want to be healthier, wealthier, more productive, or just happier. The principles in this book can help.
Absolutely. It's a really versatile framework.
All right, so let's wrap this up with the big takeaway. What's the core message of Atomic Habits that you want listeners to walk away with?
I think the core message is that small changes, done consistently, can lead to remarkable results. It's not about making huge, dramatic changes overnight. It's about making tiny improvements each day that compound over time.
It's about the power of 1% gains.
Exactly. And it's about shifting your focus from goals to identity. It's about becoming the kind of person who naturally does the things you want to do.
And it's about using the 4 laws of behavior change: make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying to make those good habits stick.
Precisely. And by following the practical strategies in the book, like habit stacking, the 2-minute rule, and the Goldilocks rule, you can create a system that makes it easier to build good habits and break bad ones.
So as you go about your day today, I want you to think about this. What's one tiny habit, something so small it almost seems insignificant, that you could start doing today that aligns with the person you want to be?
And how could you apply the principles we've discussed today to make that habit stick?
That's something to really ponder. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Atomic Habits.
It's been a pleasure.